Commander Vorith stood at the front of the lecture hall like a living piece of history. His silver scales caught the light from the holographic display, and his 4 arms moved with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The massive room held 200 cadets from 47 different species, all sitting in perfect silence. Nobody talked during Vorith's lectures. Nobody dared. Elena Torres sat in the back row, her fingers drumming against her data pad. She caught herself doing it and stopped. Then started again. Then stopped. Her human classmates had told her to keep her head down, blend in, don't draw attention. There were only 12 humans in the entire academy, and they were already the subject of enough whispers and stares. The holographic map floating above Vorith's head showed a battle from 80 years ago. The Battle of Drajan Nebula. Every military student in the Confederacy knew about it. It was the battle that proved Admiral Kethran was a genius. It was the battle that saved 3 colony worlds. It was the battle that got studied in every tactics class across 100 planets. Vorith's deep voice filled the chamber. Note the fleet positioning here. The Admiral placed his heavy cruisers in a crescent formation, forcing the enemy into this corridor. His upper right arm gestured at a cluster of glowing blue markers. This is what we call the Keswick maneuver. It has been used successfully in 17 major engagements since. Elena stared at the map. Something was wrong with it. She had noticed it 20 minutes ago when Vorith first brought up the display. She had told herself she was mistaken. She was just a first-year cadet from Earth's farming settlements. What did she know compared to Commander Vorith, who had fought in actual wars? But the wrongness kept nagging at her. The asteroid field density was off. The gravitational calculations didn't match the nebula's documented mass. The supply line vectors would have put Confederate ships directly in the path of solar radiation that should have disabled their shields. A Vrelian cadet in the 3rd row raised a hand tentatively. Commander, why didn't the enemy simply retreat through the northern passage? Vorith's expression showed approval. Excellent question, cadet. Observe here. He manipulated the display. The northern passage was mined 3 hours before engagement. The enemy's intelligence failed to detect this. Elena's fingers started drumming again. The northern passage couldn't have been mined. Not with those gravitational readings. The mines would have drifted off position within an hour. She knew this because she had grown up calculating trajectories for crop satellites around debris fields. Her family's entire livelihood depended on precise navigation through hazardous space. She looked at the chronometer. 4 minutes left in class. Her heart started beating faster. Around her, cadets were taking notes, nodding along with Vorith's explanation. A towering Draxian in full ceremonial armor sat 3 seats away, his 6 eyes focused entirely on the display. Behind her, a group of Peltharian cadets whispered to each other in their clicking language, probably discussing some fine point of tactics. Elena had been at the academy for 3 months. She had kept quiet, studied hard, and tried not to stand out. Her entrance exam scores had been high enough to earn her a full scholarship, but she knew what the other species thought. Humans were new to the Confederacy. Deathworlders from a violent, chaotic planet. Interesting, perhaps, but not sophisticated. Not refined like species who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. 3 minutes left. Vorith continued his lecture, explaining how the Confederate victory at Drajan had led to a peace treaty that still held today. This map, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, has been verified by Confederate military historians. It represents 8 decades of tactical study. Learn it well. Elena's grandfather used to say something when she was growing up. He would say it whenever she spotted a calculation error in the farm's navigation system, or noticed that a satellite's orbit was degrading before the computers caught it. Being smart ain't worth nothing if you're too scared to use it. 2 minutes left. The wrongness in the map seemed to grow larger in her mind. This wasn't just an academic exercise. Officers studied this battle. They based modern tactics on it. If the map was wrong, if the data was corrupted, then people were learning the wrong lessons. And wrong lessons in military tactics meant people died. Elena's hand moved toward the raise button on her desk. She stopped it halfway. Vorith had been teaching for 40 years. He had commanded fleets. He had won medals. And she was going to tell him he was wrong? Her hand dropped back down. 1 minute, 30 seconds left. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother and father working the vertical farms. Her younger brother who wanted to be an engineer. They were so proud when she got accepted to the academy. The first person in their family to leave Earth. The first to join the military. What would they think if she got expelled for embarrassing an instructor in front of 200 cadets? 1 minute left. But what would her grandfather think if she stayed silent when she knew something was wrong? Elena's hand shot up. She pressed the raise button before she could change her mind. Vorith was in the middle of a sentence. He paused, his 4 eyes scanning the room for the interruption. When he spotted the raised hand in the back row, his expression shifted to something between annoyance and curiosity. Yes, Cadet. He glanced at his roster. Taurus, you have a question? Every head in the lecture hall turned. 200 pairs of eyes, representing dozens of different species, all looking at her. Elena felt her face getting hot. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure the Draxian beside her could hear it. She stood up. Academy protocol required it. Commander Vorith, sir. I request permission to approach the display. The murmuring started immediately. Cadets didn't approach the display. Cadets asked questions from their seats. Cadets definitely didn't ask to touch an instructor's presentation materials. Vorith's scales shifted from silver to a slightly darker shade. Not quite anger but close. For what purpose, Cadet? Elena swallowed. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Sir, I believe there may be errors in the tactical map. The murmuring stopped. The silence that replaced it was absolute. Vorith stared at her for what felt like an hour but was probably only 3 seconds. Then, to her surprise, his scales lightened again. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed across his face. You believe there are errors, he repeated slowly, in a map that has been verified by Confederate military historians. A map that depicts a battle studied for 80 years. A map that I, personally, have reviewed hundreds of times. Yes, sir. 30 seconds left in class. Vorith gestured with his lower left arm. Very well, Cadet Taurus. Approach. Elena walked down the aisle between the tiered seats. Every step felt like walking through deep water. She could feel the stares. Could hear the whispered translations as aliens explained to each other what was happening. The human girl was challenging Commander Vorith. The Deathworlder thought she knew better. This was going to be spectacular. Elena reached the holographic display with her hands trembling slightly. The massive 3-dimensional map floated at eye level, showing ship positions, asteroid fields and tactical vectors in glowing colors. Up close, she could see even more problems than she had spotted from the back row. The gravitational calculations were definitely wrong. The asteroid density didn't match any nebula formation she had ever studied. Vorith stood beside her, his 4 arms crossed. He was easily twice her height, and his silver scales had darkened to a gunmetal gray. That was irritation she remembered from her xenobiology classes. Proceed, Cadet. Show us these errors you have discovered. Elena reached toward the interface controls. Her finger hovered over the haptic field. For a moment, doubt crashed over her like a wave. What if she was wrong? What if Earth education had taught her incorrectly? What if human understanding of physics was somehow different from the rest of the galaxy? Then she saw it again. The asteroid field marker showing density levels that would be impossible in that sector. She touched the interface. Her fingers moved fast. Back home, she had operated farm satellite controls since she was 8 years old. Navigating debris fields, calculating micro-adjustments for gravitational drift, plotting courses through solar wind patterns. Her hands knew the gestures before her brain finished thinking them. First adjustment. She expanded the asteroid field data and corrected the density readings. The field had been logged at 40% coverage, but the gravitational mass indicators showed it should have been 68%. She pulled up the historical sensor logs that were embedded in the simulation and cross-referenced them. Yes, 68%. Someone had made a transcription error decades ago, and it had been copied forward ever since. Second adjustment. The nebula's gravitational center was marked 300 kilometers off from where it should have been. She knew this because nebula formations followed predictable patterns based on their stellar remnants. She had written a paper on it in secondary school for the agricultural navigation certification. She shifted the gravitational marker to the correct position. Third adjustment. The supply line vectors. They showed Confederate ships traveling through a corridor that would have exposed them to radiation from the nebula's active pulsar. She recalculated the safe passage routes based on the corrected gravitational data. The ships would have needed to travel 40 degrees further north to avoid shield degradation. Fourth adjustment. The mine placements in the northern passage. With the corrected gravitational data, the mines would have drifted. She recalculated their positions accounting for drift over the 3-hour period before battle engagement. They would have spread out in a much wider pattern, not the tight cluster shown on the original map. Fifth and sixth adjustments came together. Fleet positioning for both Confederate and enemy forces needed to shift based on all the corrected data. She moved ship markers, recalculated firing solutions, adjusted the timeline of engagement. 6 seconds. That was all it took once her fingers started moving. Elena stepped back from the display. The revised map hung in the air, noticeably different from what had been there before. Her heart was still hammering. Her hands had stopped shaking once she started working, but now the trembling came back. The lecture hall was completely silent. 200 cadets stared at the map, then at her, then at Vorith. Vorith's face had gone through several color changes. First the gunmetal gray of irritation. Then a lighter silver of surprise. Now his scales were cycling through shades of purple that Elena didn't recognize from her xenobiology training. His forearms had uncrossed. One hand moved toward the display controls. Computer, Vorith's voice was very quiet. Run historical verification protocol on current tactical display. The holographic map shimmered. In the upper corner, a loading indicator appeared. Elena had seen this before in her navigation classes. The verification protocol compared simulation data against actual historical records pulled from Confederate military archives. It checked sensor logs, fleet reports, and astronomical data from the time period. The loading indicator spun for 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. A soft chime filled the lecture hall. Text appeared in the air next to the map in the standard Confederate font. Historical accuracy, 98.7%. Below it, smaller text appeared. Previous accuracy, 73.4%. The silence stretched out. Elena could hear her own breathing. Could hear the environmental systems humming. Could hear a Peltharian cadet's translator unit clicking softly. Vorith stared at the numbers. His scales continued cycling through those purple shades. Elena suddenly realized what she was seeing. Embarrassment. In his species, purple meant embarrassment. She had just humiliated a legendary military instructor in front of 200 students. Her scholarship was definitely gone. She was probably getting expelled. She might be sent back to Earth on the next transport. What had she been thinking? Vorith turned to look at her. His 4 eyes focused on her face with an intensity that made her want to step backward. Explain, he said. Just that one word. Elena's mouth went dry. Sir, the asteroid density readings didn't match the gravitational data. I grew up operating agricultural satellites around debris fields. We had to calculate drift and density constantly because crop satellites can't afford navigation errors. The readings in the original map would have been impossible given the mass calculations. And you saw this from the back row. Yes, sir. In a map that has been used as a teaching tool for 40 years. Sir, I think maybe the original data had transcription errors. When information gets copied multiple times, sometimes mistakes compound. And if nobody thought to run a full verification protocol against the actual historical archives, the errors would just stay there. Vorith's scales slowly shifted from purple back toward silver. He turned to face the lecture hall full of cadets. This, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, is why we verify our data. This is why we question. This is why we never assume that because something has always been done a certain way, it is correct. He gestured at the corrected map with 2 of his arms. Cadet Torres has just demonstrated something that I, and apparently decades of military historians, failed to do. She applied fresh analysis to old data. She questioned authority. She trusted her knowledge even when it contradicted accepted wisdom. Elena wasn't sure if this was good or very bad. Vorith's tone was hard to read. She also, Vorith continued, has shown that the Battle of Drajan Nebula was even more impressive than we believed. Look at the corrected fleet positions. Admiral Kethran was working with worse intelligence than we thought. The enemy had better positioning than our records showed. The Confederate victory was not the clean tactical exercise we have been teaching. It was a much closer thing, won by adaptation and improvisation. He turned back to Elena. The purple embarrassment had faded completely from his scales. How long have you been seeing these errors, Cadet Torres? Since about 20 minutes into the lecture, sir. And you waited until the last 90 seconds of class to speak. Yes, sir. Why? Elena hesitated. Honesty seemed like the only option now. Sir, I was afraid. You're Commander Vorith. You've fought in real battles. You've commanded fleets. And I'm a first-year cadet from Earth who calculates crop satellite trajectories. I thought I must be wrong. Vorith's scales lightened to an almost white shade. In his species, she remembered, that was respect. The ability to question is important, cadet. But the courage to speak when questioning authority is what separates adequate officers from exceptional ones. He manipulated the display controls, saving the corrected map. Class dismissed. Except you, Cadet Torres. Remain here. The other cadets stood and began filing out. Elena caught glimpses of their expressions as they passed. The Draxian who had sat near her gave a respectful nod. A group of Vrelian cadets whispered excitedly to each other. 3 human cadets in the middle rows looked terrified, probably worried that she had drawn too much attention to their entire species. The lecture hall emptied. Elena stood alone next to Vorith and the holographic display. Vorith waited until the last cadet had left and the doors sealed. Then he spoke again, his voice much different than his lecture tone. Quieter. More personal. That map was created 42 years ago when I was a junior tactical officer. I helped build it from combat reports and sensor logs. I have taught from it for my entire career as an instructor. He paused. It never occurred to me to verify it against the full historical archives. It never occurred to anyone. Elena didn't know what to say to that. You corrected 42 years of accumulated error in 6 seconds. Vorith's scales shimmered. How would you like a position as my teaching assistant, Cadet Torres? Elena stared at Commander Vorith. Teaching assistant. For a first-year cadet. That didn't happen. In the entire history of the Academy, teaching assistants were always 4th-year students with distinguished records. Always. Sir, I don't understand. I'm only 3 months into my first year. Vorith's scales flickered with amusement. I am aware of your academic standing, Cadet Torres. I am also aware that you just accomplished something my previous teaching assistants never did. You found critical errors that had been overlooked for decades. That demonstrates the exact kind of analytical thinking I need. Elena's mind raced. Teaching assistant meant better quarters, access to restricted tactical libraries, and a stipend that she could send home to her family. It also meant working directly with one of the most respected instructors in the Confederacy. But it also meant a target on her back from every senior cadet who thought they deserved it more. I accept, sir. Thank you. Report to my office tomorrow at 0800 hours. We have work to do. Vorith dismissed her with a gesture. Elena walked out of the lecture hall in a daze. The corridor outside was still crowded with cadets from the previous class. Conversation stopped as she emerged. Aliens of a dozen species turned to stare at the human girl who had corrected Commander Vorith's war map. She kept her head down and walked quickly toward the residential sector. Behind her, she heard the whispers start up again in multiple languages. Her translator unit caught fragments. Deathworlder. Embarrassed the commander. First-year teaching assistant. The news spread faster than she could walk. By the time Elena reached her quarters, her data pad was buzzing with messages. Most were from other human cadets. Some congratulatory, some worried, one telling her she had made things harder for all of them by drawing attention. She collapsed onto her bunk and stared at the ceiling. The standard issue quarters were small, just enough room for a bed, desk, and storage locker. The walls were bare gray metal. Through the small window, she could see one of the Academy's training grounds where cadets were running formation drills. Her datapad buzzed again. This time it was an official Academy notification. Her eyes widened as she read it. Cadet Elena Torres appointed teaching assistant to Commander Vorith, Tactical Studies Department. Effective immediately. Below that, another notification. Cadet Fletcher Threnix requests formal tactical proving against Cadet Elena Torres. Pending acceptance. Elena's stomach dropped. Fletcher Threnix. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. He was a 4th-year cadet from one of the oldest military families in the Confederacy. His grandfather had been a fleet admiral. His mother commanded a battle group. He had been the top tactical student for 3 straight years. He had never lost a simulation exercise. And he had expected to be Vorith's teaching assistant. Elena pulled up Threnix's record on her datapad. The list of achievements went on for pages. Perfect scores in tactical theory. Winner of the Academy Strategic Competition 2 years running. Decorated for excellence in every combat simulation. Fluent in 17 languages. Certified in Advanced Fleet Command. A tactical proving was the Academy's formal way to settle disputes between cadets. Both participants would enter a combat simulation overseen by senior instructors. The scenarios were brutal, complex, designed to push tactical thinking to the absolute limit, and they were public. The entire Academy could watch. Elena had never done a tactical proving. First-year cadets didn't do tactical provings. They weren't ready. Her datapad buzzed with another message. This one was from a Vrelian cadet named Kess who sat near her in navigation class. Don't accept the challenge. Threenix will destroy you. He's done 15 provings. Won all of them. 3 opponents dropped out of the academy afterward. Elena sat up and pulled her knees to her chest. She could refuse. There was no shame in a first-year cadet declining a challenge from a 4th year. Everyone would understand. She could keep the teaching assistant position, keep her head down, learn from Vorith. But Threenix would make sure everyone knew she refused. He would make sure the story became about the human who got a position she didn't deserve and was too afraid to defend it. And every time she walked into Vorith's classroom as his assistant, people would whisper that she was a coward. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her head again. Being smart ain't worth nothing if you're too scared to use it. Elena opened the acceptance form on her datapad. Her finger hovered over the confirmation button. This was insane. Threenix had years of experience. He had trained with the best tactical minds in the Confederacy. He had resources and knowledge that she couldn't match in 3 months, let alone 72 hours. She pressed the button. Challenge accepted. Tactical proving scheduled for 1,400 hours, 3 days from now. Elena spent the rest of the evening in the tactical library. The Academy's collection contained every significant battle in Confederate history. Thousands of engagements. Hundreds of thousands of individual tactical decisions. She pulled up recordings of Threenix's previous provings. He was good. Really good. His tactics were textbook perfect. He never made mistakes. Never took unnecessary risks. He won through superior planning and flawless execution. In one proving, he had defended a space station against overwhelming odds by perfectly timing his shield rotations and weapon firing sequences. In another, he had captured an enemy flagship with 0 friendly casualties through precise boarding maneuvers. Elena watched simulation after simulation. Threenix's style was classical Confederate doctrine. Elegant, efficient, predictable. That last word stuck in her mind. Predictable. She pulled up information about Earth's military history. Humans had only joined the Confederacy 20 years ago, but Earth had thousands of years of warfare experience. She started reading about human tactical philosophy. Confederate doctrine assumed certain things. It assumed that environments were stable. That gravity remained constant. That weather was controlled. Every Confederate species had evolved on worlds that were, by human standards, gentle. Their planets had mild weather, stable tectonics, and predictable ecosystems. Earth was different. Earth had hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanoes. Earth had ice ages and droughts and floods. Earth's ecosystem was chaos barely held in check. Humans had learned tactics in an environment that could kill them in 1,000 different ways. Elena read about ancient Earth generals who had won battles by using terrain, who had weaponized weather, who had turned environmental chaos into tactical advantage. She read about guerrilla warfare, about asymmetric tactics, about fighting enemies who were stronger by refusing to fight on their terms. An idea started forming in her mind. Confederate tactical doctrine was designed for order, for control, for predictable environments where you could plan every move 10 steps ahead. But what if you deliberately introduced chaos? What if you made the environment itself your weapon? She worked through the night. Her roommate, a quiet Peltharian named Senna, came in around midnight and found Elena surrounded by data displays. You should sleep, Senna clicked in her language. Elena's translator rendered it into text. Threenix will not go easy on you because you are tired. I know. I just need to figure something out. Senna's antenna twitched with concern. You accepted his challenge. Everyone is talking about it. They are saying you are brave or foolish. Mostly foolish. Probably both. Elena kept working. She pulled up data on every environmental variable that could exist in a tactical scenario. Asteroid fields, nebula formations, solar activity, gravitational anomalies, magnetic storms. The Confederate doctrine treated these as obstacles to work around. But what if you made them part of your strategy? By dawn, she had the skeleton of a plan. It was risky. It was unconventional. It might not work at all. But it was the only chance she had. She had 72 hours to turn a crazy idea into something that could beat the Academy's best tactical student. 72 hours to prove that Earth thinking could match Confederate perfection. 72 hours to show that chaos could beat order. Elena pulled up the challenge details one more time. The scenario would be randomly generated at the time of the proving. She would have no way to prepare for the specific situation. But that was fine. Her plan didn't depend on knowing the scenario in advance. Her plan depended on being willing to break every rule that Confederate tactics considered sacred. She messaged Vorith. Sir, I need access to Earth military history archives and environmental disaster simulation programs. For the proving. His response came back within minutes. Approved. My office, 0800 hours. We need to talk about what you are planning. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. Maybe she wasn't completely alone in this after all. The auditorium was packed. Elena had never seen so many cadets in one place. Every seat was filled and more students stood along the walls. Word of the tactical proving had spread across the entire academy. The human first year against Fletcher Threenix. It was the kind of spectacle that happened maybe once every few years. Elena stood in the staging area trying to control her breathing. Through the transparent wall, she could see the massive holographic display where the simulation would run. Threenix stood in the opposite staging area, tall and confident. He wore his dress uniform covered in achievement medals. His silver hair was pulled back in the traditional style of his family's military house. Commander Vorith stood at the center platform between them. His 4 arms gestured for silence. The crowd noise faded. This is a formal tactical proving between Cadet Fletcher Threenix and Cadet Elena Torres. The scenario is randomly generated and will begin in 30 seconds. Both cadets will command defensive forces protecting a colony world from attacking enemies. Victory conditions are colony survival and enemy neutralization. The simulation will run in real time with no pauses. Begin on my mark. Elena's heart hammered. She had spent 72 hours preparing, but now that the moment was here, all her plans seemed foolish. Threenix had done this 15 times. She had never done it once. The holographic display flickered to life. A planet appeared, blue and green with 3 small moons. Around it, defensive satellites and orbital stations. Below, cities marked with population numbers. Above, empty space waiting for the enemy to arrive. Scenario initialized. Resources allocated. Mark. The simulation started. Elena's command interface came alive with information. She had control of 12 defense ships, 34 fighters, 6 orbital weapons platforms, and the planet's shield generators. The colony population was 2 million civilians spread across 5 cities. Threenix would go first. He was the challenger, so he got the senior position. Elena watched his moves on the shared tactical display. His forces arranged themselves in perfect defensive formation. Ships positioned to cover all approach vectors. Fighters spread in patrol patterns. Weapons platforms charged and ready. It was textbook defensive doctrine. Beautiful in its precision. Then the enemy appeared. 3 attack groups coming from different angles. The simulation's AI was aggressive, pushing hard against Threenix's defenses. But he was ready. His ships moved in coordinated patterns, his weapons fired with perfect timing. Within 18 minutes he had destroyed 2 attack groups and routed the 3rd. Colony damage was minimal. 23% of one city's outer districts. The display showed his final score. Colony survival, 76%. Enemy neutralization, 100%. Time to completion, 18 minutes, 14 seconds. The crowd erupted in applause. Threenix stepped out of his staging area and gave a formal bow. His expression was calm, confident. He had done exactly what he always did. Perfect execution of perfect tactics. Now it was Elena's turn. The simulation reset. Same planet, same resources, same colony population. Elena's hands moved over her command interface, but she didn't arrange her forces in standard defensive formation. Instead, she did something that made several instructors in the observation booth lean forward with confusion. She moved most of her defensive ships away from the planet. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What was she doing? You defend a planet by staying close to it, not by abandoning it. Elena pulled up the scenario's environmental data. The planet had 3 moons. One of them had an unstable orbit, flagged in the simulation data as requiring future correction. There was also a small comet on the edge of the system, scheduled to pass harmlessly through the outer rim. She smiled. Chaos was already here. She just needed to use it. Her fingers flew over the interface. She calculated the comet's trajectory, its mass, its current velocity. Then she did something unprecedented. She used her ship's tractor beams to alter the comet's course. Just slightly. Just enough. The enemy forces appeared right on schedule. 3 attack groups, same as Threenix's scenario. They came in fast, weapons charging, clearly expecting to find defensive forces protecting the planet. Instead they found the comet. Elena had timed it perfectly. The redirected comet fragment entered the planet's gravity well at the exact moment the enemy forces arrived. The massive chunk of ice and rock created chaos in the immediate space around the colony world. Sensors went haywire. Targeting systems struggled to differentiate between the comet's debris field and actual ships. Gravitational fluctuations from the comet's mass disrupted formation flying. The enemy AI did what any rational tactical system would do. It tried to avoid the environmental hazard. Attack groups split up, ships scattered to get clear of the debris field. That was when Elena struck. Her ships, positioned deliberately away from the planet, now had perfect firing angles on the scattered enemy forces. She didn't try to destroy them all at once. Instead, she used what her research had called persistence hunting. She harassed them. Hit and run. Used the debris field as cover. Forced the enemy AI to keep reacting instead of executing its own plans. The enemy tried to regroup. Elena triggered another chaos event. She overloaded one of her own orbital weapons platforms, causing it to explode in a carefully calculated position. The debris from that explosion created another hazard field, further disrupting enemy formations. An instructor in the observation booth actually stood up. She's destroying her own assets? Vorith's scales showed colors Elena had never seen before. She is weaponizing chaos. The simulation continued. Elena's forces kept the enemy off balance. Every time the AI tried to form an attack pattern, she introduced a new variable. She used the unstable moon's gravity to slingshot fighters into unexpected attack angles. She vented atmosphere from damaged orbital stations to create sensor-blocking gas clouds. She even deliberately crashed an evacuated defense satellite into one enemy formation. The enemy AI was sophisticated, designed to adapt to changing conditions. But it was programmed with Confederate tactical doctrine. It expected order. It expected predictable responses. It expected opponents who fought to maintain control. Elena was doing the opposite. She was embracing chaos, making it worse, turning the entire battlefield into an unpredictable mess where her Deathworld instincts gave her an advantage. 26 minutes into the simulation, the last enemy ship retreated. Elena's forces were battered. She had lost 8 of her 12 ships. Most of her fighters were gone. 2 orbital platforms destroyed by her own hand. One moon's orbit was now critically unstable and would require expensive correction. But the colony was intact. The display showed her score. Colony survival, 94%. Enemy neutralization, 100%. Time to completion, 26 minutes, 9 seconds. The auditorium was silent. Absolutely silent. Cadets stared at the display with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to awe. Threnix stepped forward. His face was red. His hands clenched into fists. That wasn't tactics. That was luck. You deliberately destabilized the entire orbital space around the colony. You destroyed your own platforms. You could have killed millions of civilians if your calculations were wrong. Elena stepped out of her staging area. Her legs felt shaky, but she kept her voice steady. My calculations weren't wrong. You didn't win through superior tactics. You just created chaos and survived it. Yes. That one word seemed to confuse him. Elena continued, her voice quiet but carrying across the silent auditorium. That's what my species does. Earth doesn't give us stable environments and predictable conditions. We evolved in chaos. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages. Our planet tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways, so we learned to use chaos as a weapon instead of fearing it. She gestured at the holographic display still showing the debris-filled space around the colony. You fought perfectly. Your tactics were flawless. You executed Confederate doctrine exactly as it should be executed. But doctrine assumes stable conditions. It assumes you can plan everything, control everything. And you think chaos is better than control? No. I think chaos is reality and control is an illusion. The enemy in this simulation had better weapons than me. Better ships. Better resources. In a straight fight with stable conditions, they should have won. So I didn't give them stable conditions. Vorith descended from the observation booth. His scales were cycling through colors that Elena still couldn't interpret. He looked at the tactical display, then at Threnix, then at Elena. Cadet Threnix achieved victory through superior execution of established doctrine. His tactics were exemplary. His timing was perfect. His result was exactly what Confederate training is designed to produce. Threnix's expression showed relief. He thought Vorith was declaring him the winner. Cadet Torres achieved victory through adaptive chaos management. Her tactics were unconventional. Her timing was improvised. Her result demonstrates something Confederate doctrine does not adequately address. Vorith manipulated the display, highlighting specific moments from Elena's simulation. She did not win despite the chaos. She won because of it. She turned environmental hazards into weapons. She sacrificed assets to create tactical advantages. She accepted risk that Confederate doctrine would never accept. He turned to address the entire auditorium. What Cadet Torres demonstrated is not luck. It is a fundamentally different approach to tactical thinking. One that evolved on a world where survival meant embracing uncertainty rather than eliminating it. Threnix's face went from relieved to angry. So the human wins because she's willing to take insane risks? No, Elena said quietly. I win because those risks aren't insane to me. They're calculated. I grew up calculating trajectories through debris fields where one mistake meant my family lost a year's crops. I learned navigation in an environment that changes constantly. What looks like chaos to you looks like home to me. Vorith's scales finally settled on a steady silver. Both cadets demonstrated exceptional skill. Both achieved victory. But only one demonstrated something we can learn from. Something Confederate tactical doctrine needs to study and understand. He looked directly at Threnix. You are still the finest tactical student in your year, cadet. But you have just learned an important lesson. Sometimes perfect execution of doctrine is not enough. Sometimes you must be willing to fight on terms you didn't choose, in conditions you cannot control. The auditorium remained quiet. Elena could see the reactions in the crowd. Some cadets looked thoughtful. Others confused. A few seemed angry. The human cadets in the audience had mixed expressions, pride and worry competing on their faces. Threnix stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He gave a formal military salute. I request permission to study your tactical approach, Cadet Torres. For one semester. Elena returned the salute, surprised. Permission granted. As the crowd began to file out, still buzzing with conversation, Elena realized something. She hadn't just won a tactical proving. She had introduced Earth thinking into Confederate military doctrine. For better or worse, things were going to change. The next morning, Elena woke to find her datapad flooded with messages. Hundreds of them. Requests for interviews from Academy media. Questions from tactical instructors. Messages from cadets she had never spoken to. Even 3 requests from Confederate military analysts asking for detailed breakdowns of her proving strategy. She ignored most of them and headed to Commander Vorith's office at 0800 hours as scheduled. The corridors were more crowded than usual, and conversations stopped as she passed. Some cadets nodded respectfully. Others whispered behind their hands. A group of Draxian seniors actually stepped aside to let her pass, which never happened to first-year students. Vorith's office was in the old wing of the academy, where the walls were decorated with battle standards from famous engagements. She knocked on the door frame. Enter Cadet Torres. Vorith sat behind a desk covered in data displays. His 4 arms moved between different screens, reviewing footage from the tactical proving. He gestured for her to sit. You have created quite a stir, cadet. The tactical department received 47 requests overnight for analysis of your simulation. 3 senior instructors want to interview you. And Admiral Keslev herself messaged me asking about this Deathworld doctrine everyone is discussing. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Sir, I just did what made sense to me. I didn't mean to cause problems. Vorith's scales flickered with amusement. Problems? You demonstrated a tactical approach that Confederate doctrine has no framework for understanding. That is not a problem. That is an opportunity. He pulled up a holographic display showing her tactical proving from multiple angles. The Academy leadership met this morning. They want to create a new course module studying adaptive tactics in unstable environments. They are calling it Deathworld Doctrine, based on the environmental conditions that shaped human tactical thinking. A whole course? Sir, I'm just a first-year cadet. I don't know enough to. You know things that no Confederate military officer knows. You understand something we have overlooked for thousands of years. Vorith leaned forward. Every species in the Confederacy evolved on what humans would call paradise worlds. Stable. Predictable. Safe. Our tactics reflect that. We assume control. We plan for order. But the galaxy is not always orderly. He gestured at the tactical display. What you did yesterday was not reckless. It was adaptive. You assessed the environment, identified variables others would consider obstacles, and transformed them into weapons. That is a skill we need to learn. Elena thought about her grandfather working the vertical farms, constantly adjusting for weather changes and orbital debris. She thought about her mother calculating navigation routes that changed every season because Earth's magnetic field fluctuated. Skills that seemed basic at home but were apparently revolutionary here. What do you need me to do, sir? Work with me to develop the curriculum. You will not teach it yourself, but you will help design scenarios and provide insight into Earth-based tactical thinking. It will be an optional advanced module for 3rd and 4th year students. Vorth paused. Including Cadet Threenix, who has formally requested to be the first student enrolled. That surprised her. Threenix wants to study my tactics? He is a professional. You defeated him fairly, and he recognizes value in what you demonstrated. That is the mark of a good officer. Over the next 3 weeks, Elena found herself in a strange new routine. She attended her regular classes, worked as Vortha's teaching assistant, and spent hours designing tactical scenarios for the new Deathworld Doctrine module. The scenarios included environmental chaos events, unstable stellar phenomena, and situations where standard doctrine would fail. Threenix showed up to their first planning session stiff and formal. He sat across from Elena in the tactical library, his posture perfect, his expression neutral. Cadet Torres. Thank you for agreeing to work with me. You can call me Elena. We're going to be working together for a semester. His expression softened slightly. Fletcher. My friends call me Fletcher. They spent 3 hours that day going through Elena's tactical thinking process. Fletcher was brilliant at analysis, breaking down each decision she had made during the proving and asking why she chose that specific action. Elena found herself explaining concepts she had never put into words before. On Earth, we have this thing called a forest fire, she said, pulling up images on her datapad. It's destructive, dangerous, kills trees. But some plants actually need fire to reproduce. Their seeds won't open without the heat. So fire isn't just destruction. It's also renewal. Fletcher studied the images. And you think of tactical chaos the same way? Not as something to prevent, but as something that creates opportunities. Exactly. Confederate doctrine tries to eliminate variables. Human doctrine accepts that some variables can't be eliminated, so we figure out how to use them. Their working relationship grew easier over the weeks. Fletcher was still formal, still precise in everything he did, but he listened. He asked questions. He admitted when Earth thinking revealed gaps in his own training. One afternoon, they were reviewing a scenario involving solar flare activity disrupting communications. Fletcher had designed a response using standard protocols for communication loss. Elena suggested something different. What if we don't try to restore communications? What if we use the disruption to make the enemy think we're more disorganized than we are? Let them commit to an attack based on false assumptions. Fletcher stared at the tactical display for a long moment. Then he smiled. Actually smiled. That's devious. I like it. The Deathworld Doctrine module launched 6 weeks after Elena's tactical proving. 28 cadets enrolled, including Fletcher and 2 other 4th year students who had previously won academy tactical competitions. The first class was taught by Commander Vorth, with Elena sitting in the back row to observe. Vorth presented a scenario where defending forces had to protect a mining station during an asteroid storm. The cadets struggled. They kept trying to stabilize the environment first, eliminate the chaos before engaging the enemy. One Vrelian cadet actually said, "This is impossible. No commander would fight during an asteroid storm." Vorth's scales showed amusement. Cadet Torres, would you like to respond? Elena stood up. Every eye in the classroom turned to her. 6 weeks ago this would have terrified her. Now it just felt normal. No commander would choose to fight during an asteroid storm. But sometimes the enemy attacks when conditions are bad. Sometimes disasters happen during combat. Sometimes you don't get to pick stable conditions. The question isn't whether you would choose to fight in chaos. The question is whether you can win when chaos finds you anyway. She walked to the tactical display. On Earth we have a saying. Humans are persistence hunters. We don't give up. We don't stop. We keep going when conditions are terrible because giving up means dying. That's what Deathworld Doctrine is about. Not causing chaos for fun. Surviving chaos because you have to. The class was quiet. Then Fletcher raised his hand. Show us how you would approach this scenario. Elena spent the next 20 minutes walking through a solution. Using asteroids as mobile cover. Timing attacks between impact waves. Accepting damage to less critical systems to keep critical ones functional. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't elegant. But it worked. After class, Vorth pulled her aside. You are becoming a teacher, Cadet Torres. Whether you realize it or not. I'm just explaining how I think, sir. That is what teaching is. 3 months after the tactical proving, Elena sat in Voritha's regular tactical studies class. He was presenting a new battle analysis, one she had helped him verify against historical records. The map showed a complex fleet engagement near a binary star system. Elena watched carefully. She had learned to trust her instincts now, and something about the stellar radiation calculations looked wrong. Her hand went up immediately. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Vorith paused mid-sentence and smiled. His scales flickered with what she now recognized as pride. Yes, Cadet Torres? Sir, the radiation shielding requirements for ships operating that close to a binary star. The calculations assume both stars are in quiet phase. But if one was experiencing stellar activity, the radiation levels would be much higher. Vorith pulled up additional data. Checked the historical records. His scales shifted to that white shade of respect. You are correct. The original analysis failed to account for documented stellar activity during the battle date. Well spotted. Around the classroom, Elena saw the reactions. No more surprise. No more whispered comments about the Deathworlder challenging authority. Just acceptance. She was Voritha's teaching assistant. She was good at this. It was normal now. Fletcher, sitting 3 rows ahead, turned around and gave her a quick thumbs up. The human gesture looked awkward when he did it, but she appreciated the effort. After class, a first-year Peltharian cadet approached Elena nervously. Cadet Torres? I noticed something in yesterday's navigation assignment. An error in the asteroid drift calculations. But I was afraid to mention it because I am only first year. Elena smiled. Come on. Let's go look at it together. And stop being afraid. If you see something wrong, you speak up. That's the job. That evening, Elena sat in her quarters and recorded a message home. Her family had been sending excited messages ever since news of the tactical proving reached Earth. Hi Mom, Dad, Connor. Things are good here. Really good. The teaching assistant work is challenging, but I love it. Commander Vorith says I have a talent for tactical analysis. They created a whole new course module based on stuff I demonstrated. Can you believe that? She paused, trying to find words for what had changed. I was so scared when I first got here. Scared to speak up. Scared to be wrong. Scared that I didn't belong. But I'm not scared anymore. I found my voice. And it turns out having a Deathworlder's perspective isn't a weakness. It's exactly what the Confederacy needs. She smiled at the camera. Grandpa would be proud. I'm using what I know. Not hiding it. Not apologizing for it. Just doing the work. Tell him I remember what he said. Being smart is worth something when you're brave enough to use it. Elena ended the recording and sent it off. Through her window, she could see the Academy's main campus lit up against the night. Cadets from dozens of species walking between buildings. Ships launching from the training fields. The whole complex machine of Confederate military education continuing its eternal cycle. And somewhere in that machine, a small piece had changed. A new way of thinking had been introduced. Deathworld doctrine. Chaos management. Adaptive tactics for unstable environments. All because one girl from Earth's farming settlements had raised her hand and said, "Sir, I think there might be an error." Elena pulled up her schedule for tomorrow. 2 classes. 4 hours of teaching assistant work. A meeting with Fletcher to review new tactical scenarios. A training session for cadets interested in learning Earth-based navigation techniques. She smiled. She had found her place here. Not by being quiet. Not by blending in. But by being exactly who she was. A Deathworlder with a talent for seeing what others missed. And now, finally, the courage to speak up about it.